Good afternoon. How are you? We're going to have a great panel this afternoon. So my name is Gary Lucchese. I'm the Vice President of Motion Pictures for the Producers Guild, and I'm one of the co-chairs with Tracey Edmonds of this conference that you've been attending the past 2 days. So this afternoon, you're going to be seeing a session called The Complete Package, Making Movies in the Studio System. This session will explore the challenges and strategies behind greenlighting projects, closing a deal, pitching a concept, and forging effective partnerships. On the panel will be Scott Stuber, Will Packer, Barry Mendel, and Bonnie Arnold, and Tracey Edmonds is going to be hosting it and will command your attention. We ask that you turn off all your cell phones, and what's going to happen is that they're going to do their thing, and then the last 15 minutes there will either be questions via microphone or cards. So have a great time. Thank you so much.
Well, welcome, everyone. I am really excited to be moderating this panel. And on the panel, we have 4 of the busiest and most successful producers in Hollywood today. And they're going to be here answering the 2 questions that I know everyone wants answers to, that being, how do you sell a project to a studio, and how do you get a film greenlit? So, Scott Stuber, since you've actually helped run a studio before and you have a studio deal right now, I'm going to ask you the first question, which is, how has the studio greenlight process changed over the years, and where is it going next?
You know, it's changed in the sense that as the business has evolved, the DVD market obviously was huge in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that now kind of the new frontier for the studios is a lot international. So there's a lot of different voices involved. So when you go, you know, Barry and I both work quite a bit at Universal. When you go, there's a lot of different people you need to speak to in terms of, you know, advocating your movie. So you've got to make sure domestic marketing, international marketing, the home video people still, because of pay-per-view and a lot of different areas of income. So there's got to be, everyone kind of has to touch your film now in a much more profound way to make sure that there's an excitement at all levels, because it takes an army now to make movies kind of transcend in this marketplace.
Will, what about you? You've been incredibly successful in getting urban films made, and we know how difficult it is because there's only a couple slots allocated for urban films per year, and you've been a trailblazer. So how have you been able to get your films made?
Well, you know, it's challenging because when she says urban, she means black. So just have to put that out there. There's a guy in the back from New York. Me too. I make urban films. You know, it's tough because, you know, Scott did a really good job breaking it down, and part of that greenlight equation now, a big part of it, is the international marketplace. So we're making films that are primarily aimed at an African-American audience, or at least a studio is intending on marketing it that way. Then you have to be aware, you know, the numbers, the equation is very different because the international marketplace has not been one where those films have performed very well. So when the numbers are being calculated, like Scott was talking about, those numbers, they're not big for the types of films that I've had some success with. So, and with the DVD marketplace used to buoy these types of films because that audience over-indexed in terms of consuming those types of films from home entertainment. So now what that means is that I have to be really creative about how I put these films together, have to keep the negative costs really low, have to be really smart about it. And you basically are selling it when the conversation's had in those greenlight meetings, you're talking about it as, you know, a domestic, primarily theatrical play, really. And that's, you know, always been a lost leader. That's not really an area where, you know, studios are very comfortable. So I have to figure out how to, you know, make films for, you know, a really smart negative cost, meaning not a lot, and know for a fact that we're going to deliver a particular audience and hopefully over-deliver on that niche.
What are the typical budgets that you've seen on urban films these days?
You know, under 20 is a safe place, you know, to be. My last one was, you know, right in that like 14-ish range. The one before that, the one I just completed was probably right around, you know, 13 net. We shot it in Atlanta where there's a tax incentive, and then there's like a Think Like a Man was, right around, 13, 14 net. So that's kind of like a safe place to play. Tyler Perry, somebody else who does a lot of these films, he's, in that area. He's a little bit higher, I think, but, as the market is kind of self-adjusting as it always does, I think even his will probably be made for a little bit less. But the challenge for a filmmaker like myself and for other filmmakers, if you're, making something for a niche, or even if you don't want to, but you feel like you're pushed into a niche, is to make films that can appeal to broader audiences, because at the end of the day, that's the name of the game.
Got it.
I have a question for Will. Are there,
Wait a minute now.
You're out of order a little
The
bit.
panel
I'll allow
just
it.
to ask questions?
Are there movies that are in the urban genre that have broken out internationally that are where you can kind of like say, well, but occasionally
Right.
it does break. Like,
Yeah.
look at that one.
Yeah. I mean, probably my biggest film in terms of international performer was Stomp the Yard. And, it was dance. And there's certain genres that, will do well overseas. I don't know that there's one that Hollywood would consider just kind of like a pure urban property that has really worked overseas. But you know what? It's just a matter of time. I mean, that's probably a larger conversation. I don't know if we'll get into it or not. But, the reality is that there are people in my films that have, like I've done films with Beyonce and Chris Brown, people that have like big international audiences. So there has to be a way to connect those dots, because obviously there are people in these other territories that are interested in, supporting those artists. So why wouldn't they see them in a film, So it's a process.
Barry, so let's talk a little bit about selling films to studios. What do you think the studio expectations are in terms of when a producer walks into a room to pitch something? How can a producer be best prepared, and what are the studios expecting to hear?
Well, I think it's pretty hard to generalize. Obviously they want to make money, but it changes from studio to studio. I think at Warner Brothers is run by Jeff Robinoff, and he has a certain kind of taste, and he has certain kind of directors who he grew up, like he was an agent before he was a studio executive, and he was into sci-fi and genre stuff and kind of large canvas movies. He doesn't really get comedy. He's not famous for kind of getting comedy in the same way, or that's not been his focus, although he's done it successfully. So just at each place, they're run by, there are corporations and there are, home video and international, and everybody's got to get on the same page. But there is somebody at the top who is kind of driving it, and if they want to make stuff, they can. And so it's a little bit of understanding who the audience is and who are the type of people they want to be making movies with in terms of directors and stars, and what kind of films have they had success with. So it just varies from place to place.
Yeah, right.
I think it's fine. I'm just
Yeah, I was
saying,
gonna ask you, Bonnie.
financially, I
Yep.
think they have to. I mean, it's sort of it's hard for them to go out of something that they haven't had a lot of success or experience with.
Right.
The studio, and every studio is like that, I think. I mean, and that's always been the way. You're always pitching to a certain person in their particular taste, and they know who they're making the movie for.
Right. Can you talk to us a little bit about animation? Because I know your experience has, really been successful with the animated world. And so
Well, I think-
how do you sell those projects?
Well, I think just back to what they were talking about before, I think our films, the past two films that Dreamworks has done, I mean, and we had, Madagascar 3 open this weekend very successfully. Yay. And, but the past two films that we did, which was Kung Fu Panda 2 and Puss in Boots, actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, did better internationally than they did, domestically. So that, the international market is growing. And then we found that but you have to tailor that to that aspect as well, because certain comedy can be very particular to an American audience. It may not. We always have to sort of check ourselves that some of this comedy will translate, internationally, and people are going to get it, and it's not too sort of Americanized. And so I think that's an important factor. But we like to say we make, movies for all ages, and sometimes it's tough. It's almost easier sometimes when you're making it for a genre or a niche, because you know the type of people that are coming. When you're, we need to make it that it's going to appeal to mom and kids, and if we're lucky, little older kids and their dates and that type of thing.
Right.
So, but that's, that's the type of, and we develop a lot of our own material in-house. And, but development means we just get it ready, and then we have to sort of try to, then it's up to the producer and the director to prove to the studio before we completely decide to spend all this money getting it made that it's going to work. What is it going to look like visually? Not only does it have to be a good script, but we have to sort of do a lot of testing and a lot of what we call visual development, a lot of artwork to sort of know, so we can all see what we think it's actually going to look like and play like. And we do, re-record some of the voice talent ahead of time and play it and, see how it's going to work. Because once you, again, kind of pull the trigger to spend the money, you're spending a lot of money to get it made.
Right.
And we're, doing all the financing.
Right.
What's the average budget of like a DreamWorks animated movie?
Well, I mean, there's below the line.
Jeffrey will
and there's-
kill you if you tell them that. You know that.
I thought it was a public company.
I'm sure you can look. No, but I mean, we try to, we do try to make it for a budget. I'd say, they range from, and we do have a range of what we spend. But I'd say, in the ballpark of sort of 80, kind of below the line. But then there's marketing costs and, things on top of that. So, and then there are people that make them for less and people make them for more. I mean, the Pixars, the Disneys, the Illuminations. I mean, there's a range. Yeah. Obviously, it's better to try to make it for, just like, Will was saying, is for cost effectively as you possibly can. But it's getting more expensive all the time to make the movies.
What about, let's talk about talent and how important talent is and casting is in the process. Will, I know in a lot of your films, you've worked with a lot of the same actors and actresses on numerous occasions in several different films. Do you have a lot of direct relationships with talent, or do you find yourself going through the agencies when you're putting your films together? What's your process?
No, I'm probably a little bit different in that I'm probably the only person up here that doesn't live primarily in LA, right? So I'm kind of an outsider in a few
Where do you
different
live?
ways. In Atlanta, Georgia. Come
Awesome.
over.
Yay!
Come see me. Have you guys all shot in Atlanta?
Shooting there
That's
right
my
now.
hometown.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Is that your hometown?
Absolutely.
What part? We may be cousins or something. You know how the South is.
Buckhead.
There you go. Okay.
I said the right word.
So, yeah, no, I say that just to say that my approach is definitely a little bit non-traditional. So, no question, the way that I have presented and packaged my films has to do with a lot of direct relationships. So, and I think that the producer process these days is more about that than ever before. So, I, respect the agencies, have some great relationships with some agencies, but for the most part, when I'm putting my films together, I am going directly to talent and putting them together and bringing them, to the studio and telling them who they are and what they mean and why. For instance, Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is somebody who I think is being seen as like an emerging talent, in Hollywood. But he's somebody that, has been out for a while, somebody I've been very familiar with for a while. So before I cast him in Think Like a Man, I went to 3 different markets to see him perform his stand-up because I wanted to see how he related to different audiences in different parts of the country. And I also wanted to get to know him and develop a personal relationship with him. So, and he was, definitely like the heartbeat of that particular film. And, we've got another film we're doing together. So it's definitely, I think, advantageous to me to have those direct talent relationships.
That's great. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of imperative now, and it goes across the board. I mean, obviously, the old kind of adage is, Brad Pitt might be your best friend, but if you don't have a good script to give him, he's never going to do your movie. And that's the truth, You've got to have good material. And, more and more now, there's a real opportunity for producers with writers because the market is very difficult. There's a lot of writers who need work. There used to be kind of a protective shield from the agencies around them. And the agents need the help now. They need advocates. So that, I think, is the key. Because then if you have that great piece of material, Will Smith and Brad Pitt and whomever it might be, but really the writers really want the time and the effort, and it's why, frankly, more writers are getting managers because they have the time to help them develop and figure out their ideas. So producerially, when you're starting out, writers. Your actor friends will come. They're great and they're important. Like Will's saying, for me, it's great that I can call a movie star, Denzel Washington, and say, will you look at this? And he'll look at it quicker because I have a relationship with him. We've had success together. But really, the thing I ask him to look at has to be a great piece of material.
Yeah, makes sense. Barry, you've had incredible success with Bridesmaids and your other films, but what are some of the hard lessons that you've learned along the way?
Hard lessons. Where does one begin? Well, I mean, the hardest lesson I think is, just goes along with what Scott's saying, which is if you don't have a great script, you're really not going to get anywhere. And I'd say the hardest part of my job, and probably all of our jobs, is getting the script to be good. And, there's a lot of scripts that, based on it being a great idea, can get you to a 5, or there's a lot of other scripts that are not a great idea, but based on a great writer writing them can get you to a 5. But how you get from 5 to 8 or 9, which is where you kind of need to be to have a movie that's going to communicate with an audience, because I think, from the beginning, I always felt like the goal was not to get the movie made, but to have the movie be good. And there's a higher standard. And so that, to me, the hardest lessons have been times where I've had too much confidence in an idea or a writer, and then when you put it up against the standard of what it really needs to be a good movie or a great movie, it just doesn't get there.
What about you, Bonnie?
Well, I think in terms of animation, I think one of the and this really, any type of production, and I'm sure probably the guys would agree, I think the hardest part of my job really, and this is endless really, is the fact that I feel like as a producer, I try to make the movie that the director wants to make, but then again, I'm being employed by the studio. So I have to sort of always, I feel like every day I'm walking this tightrope of, trying to get the best movie made. Once the material, of course, is great, but also trying to support the movie the director wants to make, and also watch out for the best interest of the studio in terms of how much the movie's going to cost. And I feel like that's where my experience, and then that's why they hire me to sort of, I don't have to really have my ear on the track to know that this train is going to come run you over. So I have to kind of make, kind of walk that line and balance that.
I have a question for Bonnie.
Yes, Barry.
Co-moderator Barry, everybody.
Go right ahead.
So I've been in this situation with a film that will remain nameless, but
Okay.
just say you're working on a film, and the director says, okay, I have all of these new ideas that are going to take us pretty wildly over budget. And I want to do them, and I want your support, and this is the way I want to handle it with the studio. I don't want them to know about it. I want them to kind of slowly find out about it over time. Because that's the only way I'm going to be able to make it happen, and I want to make it happen because I want to make a great film, and that's why you signed up to work with me, because you want to make a great film, so here we are.
Ooh, that's tough. That's really tough. Because
Scott, how do you handle that?
Yeah, really. I mean,
Jack
but
Daniels.
I think the hard thing. The thing about it is, this is really the great advantage of animation. Is, at least in my experience, is we put the movie, because we basically edit the film before we shoot it. The shooting is the animating of it. We sort of know what the movie is.
Right.
So you do have those conversations.
That's a
You
more
are going to have those conversations way earlier than
Yeah.
when you would in sort of live action, and you're not just on a set. I mean, Jeffrey Katzenberg is walking around sort of every day. So it'd be hard to kind of pull that one off on him. But then, so you kind of have the movie before that. But I think it is a negotiation thing, because there are some ideas that you say, well, and we also work pretty strongly to a release date.
Yeah.
We know way ahead when we're working toward this date. And it's a little bit more like an assembly line than sort of the live action world is. I mean, you can get off track a bit, and once you're starting the animation process, which takes about 18 months, you can get off track a little bit here and there, but you can't go wildly off, or you're just not, it has
Yeah.
huge repercussions.
There's just deadlines you have
Yeah,
to keep
so I
hitting.
think in a way, so I guess what I'm saying, a little bit the advantage is you have a little bit of a tighter rope
Yeah.
in the process that we work in, because it's not quite, you can't just sort of, in my experience in live action, and I know there's a lot more hesitancy to do that, but at one point you could just throw money at it and just fix it, as much as you're willing to throw at it. You can't do that in animation and make your date. You know what I'm saying? It's just going to derail you. So some of it is, you're hampered by that, and I think those directors are a little bit more aware because of that. Does that answer that sort of? I just was going to go back really quickly to the hardest lesson is that I produced a couple of years ago a small picture that I developed for a long time called The Last Station. And I think the hardest thing for me was that once we went all through the difficulty of getting that movie made completely independently, we could not sell it at all to anybody domestically. Nobody wanted it, period. And we had, raised all the money internationally, it was just such a disappointment that we
Yeah.
couldn't sell it at all. And we just, all of us were standing there just like, the bank's going to want their money and all that kind of thing. So those are the hard lessons that you actually end up making a good film, and then no one,
I thought
really wants.
Sony Classics
they
distributed
only,
it.
they only,
You got two Oscar nominations.
well, after they turned it down like 2 times, and after we finally took it to Telluride to the film festival, and Sony Classics was there, and they saw the audience went crazy over it, and they changed their mind.
Well, it had
But
a
I
happy
mean,
ending.
but it did have a happy ending. But boy, there was a lot of sweating and a lot of angst over that. So that was just you just don't know until you're there as to
Yeah.
what some of these things. What can happen.
What
But-
about, so I mean, talking about hard lessons, I mean, all of us up here, we've had successful films and we've had films that didn't work out. So how do you guys prepare yourself or recover from a film when it doesn't work out? Because I know it's hard. I mean, you pour your heart and soul into producing
That's never
a
happened.
film, and so when it doesn't work out, how do you move on? How do you move on to the next one?
You start blaming other people.
Write that down.
Before it's released.
So, I mean, first of all, we'll start with the marketing. I mean, come on.
They're easy to blame. I always blame marketing.
What were they thinking?
Right.
And then, you can go from there, too.
I mean, the interesting thing about the business is one of the things I find kind of insane about it is every single person came here with a dream. Every single one. Everyone was a kid who dreamed they wanted to tell stories. Writer, director, producer, studio executive, agent. And yet we sometimes relish in other people's failure. Yet when it happens to us, it's what I would say, the great thing is you're perpetually 15, which means you can dream like a 15-year-old, but you're also just as insecure as you were when you were 15. So there is I think when you start to get scars, like, it sucks. It's like you walk in the restaurant and the movie didn't go, and someone looks at you and you're like, they're talking about me, or they think my movie sucked, or oh my God, like how could this happen to me? And it's not true. And the truth is everyone is so fantastically narcissistic in this business that they're onto their own shit anyway. So, but you do, as you get older and as you get some scars, there's a great camaraderie in it. There really is a good family in Hollywood, and the thing is, if you're a decent person, which I think everyone on this panel is, you're really happy for people's success and genuine, because when you leave now, it's a human thing. So you leave, you're leaving your family, your friends. Unfortunately, most movies are shot in Atlanta, so he's the smart one here. But you're out of town and you're sacrificing time, that whether it's your kid's birthday or your best friend's dinner or your parents' thing or whatever, so that you want to be empathetic. People go away 2 years of their lives, and when it doesn't work, no one ever sets out to make a bad movie, ever. And to Barry's point about lessons learned, the thing that you do get refined in is your spidey senses. And all of us have them up here, and it's 2 weeks before the movie starts, and in your gut, you know that the 2 leads have no chemistry, that you cast the wrong girl, but you cast her because the movie could get made. You know your script's a 5 and not an 8. And that's the lesson, is as much as it's in economics where we're all trying to make a living and keep things going, if your spidey senses are that strong, don't do it.
I would also add that success and failure are things which change over time, and I would say the films that I have been involved with, which have been the least successful, are some of the films that I'm most proud of, and some of the films that have been more successful I don't personally think are that good. So how do you have to, as an individual, define your own success? Are you looking for, is it just like how I feel about it? I don't care if it does well at all, well then you're not a human being. Is it the success, the respect of people who you respect? How do you feel about critics? How do you feel about box office? All of those things are things that, as you're fortunate enough to get into it and get to make movies, you have to start to define what matters to you, because, we just watched The King of Comedy at home 2 nights ago. That movie was an unmitigated bomb, and it was a kind of disaster for everybody involved. It's a great movie. People are still watching it. It was a groundbreaking film, and I would trade 3/4 of the movies that I produced to have been the producer of that movie. So
Right.
I agree. I mean, that's the other thing, is that you have to decide, what are you basing that on? You can't put your self-worth on something you have no control over, really. Not the box office and the critic. I mean, you really don't have control
you also
over that piece
like,
of
do
it.
I feel good about my own work on the movie? I was given this opportunity. It could be, why did I do the film?
Right.
So it's
Who you meet and who you work with and those kind of people. And
somebody once gave me great advice, which was, if you do a film and you make one friend that you actually keep for the rest of your life, then the film is a success.
That's great, yeah. Cool, well, talking about success, let's talk about how important international and global success is these days in terms of getting films greenlit and making films. I know, again, mainly animation from your end, but how important is international for you guys?
yeah, well, like I say, we've been sort of making more, generally more money internationally with Dreamworks than we have, even the past couple of films domestically. So that's big, that's a big, big piece of it. And they do a lot of work in order making special versions for different countries in terms of dubbing for kids and those kind of things. So we definitely invest a lot in that, in that that market. So
Right.
very important, especially since this DVD market has changed. We still have somewhat, but not in the way that it was before.
Right. And Will, how are you feeling? I mean, obviously we constantly hear that there's zero international value for urban films. I mean, do you believe what we're being told, or do you really believe that there's untapped, money internationally?
Definitely untapped, no question. And it will change. It's a process. And like everything over time, I think that, I've had films that have done, some $60, $70 million in the U.S. And just as a studio, as a business, I don't care what you're selling. If you're selling widgets or plastic cup, whatever it is, it's an inefficient model if you can sell, 60, 70 million of them in one place, and then you can't figure out how to sell any of them in the rest of the world. Like, that's just an inefficient model. So I think a little bit of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think there is not enough of an incentive. There's already, zero expectation that those films are gonna work. But, filmmakers like myself and some others are pushing hard and, and being creative about how we're positioning these films to a global marketplace. And we have to have the support of the studios, but I think it's changing.
I have a question for Will.
Go ahead.
Did you guys ever think about, like, you and the cast saying, whether you're going to pay for it or not, we're going to go to London, Paris, we're going to do our own international publicity tour. We hope you'll support us. But because, I early in my career, I did a few films with Wes Anderson, and his first film, not released internationally. The first film we did together, released in one market. And we just thought, like Woody Allen, the only way he's going to be able to keep getting money to make his movies is if he gets some sort of international following. And they just said, well, there's no audience. So we just made a concerted effort to send him and just say, you're going to be in Europe for a month just kissing a lot of ass.
Yeah.
And
That's what it takes.
And recently I've been doing some movies with Judd Apatow, and his movies didn't travel very well, and the kind of domestic to foreign numbers were just huge disparities, almost like urban films. And they just committed to a big campaign of going, bringing the stars over there and painstakingly doing that work. Do you think that's the next step?
No question. I mean, you hit it right on the head. Those are the types of conversations that we're having right now. I think it's about, what that right product is to do that with. I think you have to have, some level of support, but that's what it's going to take. I mean, Will Smith, tells a great story of him going before he was, the biggest star in the world, going and, and beating the pavement, around the world and introducing himself, largely on his own to those foreign markets. So that's absolutely what we're talking about right now. I mean, obviously Tracey is as a prolific producer herself, and I've had these same types of conversations, and those things are in the works.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really frustrating. Even on Jumping the Broom, we had our trailer released, and you and I know we're both on Twitter all the time.
Yeah.
And so, and you have people from all over the world tweeting saying, I love the trailer, and I can't wait to see the film. When are you guys coming out in the UK? Yeah. Or when are you coming out in South Africa? So, I mean, they are really, really hungry to see more stories like this. And so we've got to really keep pushing from our end to get the studios to really push that.
I mean, the business will have to do it. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's an inefficient model, and it has to, they have to figure out how to get more profits out of these types of films.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the future of the business, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I think most producers are kind of paranoid and pessimistic as a as a rule, and you gotta look at the business and you say, oh boy, the music business just kind of went belly up as a business. The record business did in the last 10 years. It's crazy. And now you watch people downloading movies and how fast they download and streaming. And is there going to be the revenue for attendance is flat or going down? Is there going to be is our business shrinking? But the fact is, it's not. There are not that many cinemas in Africa. There are not that many DVD players in underdeveloped countries. The movie business is a growth business, but all of the growth is international. America is flattened out in terms of we'll find different ways to consume the movies, but the amount of money coming in for movies in America will remain roughly the same.
But they have cell phones.
For the rest of our lifetime. Yeah.
I mean, that's how they're going to, I
But-
just think it's a matter of these people, trying to figure out how to monetize the stuff, because there's going to be this need for the product. It's just figuring out how to, how the studios, how to make money from it.
Yeah, but the one area that's going to grow in terms of revenue for our product, films, is internationally. So international is going to have a bigger say at the table of the greenlight process. They're going to have, the movies that we make are probably going to have more of a mind towards reaching an international audience than they do just America, if you look 10 years and 20 years down the line.
But Bonnie's right too. I mean, we have to, as an industry, adapt faster than music did. They just didn't, and they're just dying or dead, depending on who you talk to, because of it. So, she's right. I think that there is a whole generation where that's coming. I don't know if they're here yet, but that's coming, where theatrical may not be the premium format. They don't mind seeing it on
The
a
screen
smartphone.
like that.
So
This
yeah,
big.
right.
Plus, I think Gary's right with the screens. I mean, I saw some numbers today on Madagascar 3, and the numbers in the screens now in China and Russia, our numbers were huge.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, there weren't screens there. I mean,
Yeah.
many times, I mean, they're just.
China and Russia are the preeminent kind of foreign territories right now. But I think to everyone, the thing though that is a lot of the movies people make up here, you get challenged, whether it's an African-American movie or a comedy, and you have to constantly look there and not feel, to Barry's point, depressed about it, but to evolve it. And that's all kinds of different aspects. One of the things Judd has done very smart, if you watch, it's very subtle, but he's got an Australian or a Brit in his movie, which are very good comedy markets because they speak our language. We're going through it right now in an interesting way, which I've never done, and it's partly because it's half animation. I made this film with Seth MacFarlane, this TED movie about a very degenerate teddy bear. And we've gone over the last 2 months and tested the movie in every market and dubbed the bear in different languages to see how it would play. And to Universal's credit, they took the time to do the market research rather than just saying it's a comedy, it might not play. And then strategically, we've gone in and got the top actor in every one of those markets to do the voice of the bear, which gives us that chance. So the biggest Russian actor, the biggest German actor. So you have to, instead of throwing up your arms, I think it's to the point, be entrepreneurial, because the one great thing about animation, comedy, and African-American films, the audience likes the communal experience. It's to Will's point. There's, you're there, you're loyal, you're there, you're underserved. Everybody likes to go in the theater with 500 people and laugh. Everybody likes to go see themselves. And, for a family, there's nothing better with a good animated movie. Every one of my friends who has kids are like, thank God for Dreamworks and Pixar. So I think you just have to continually, be smart about it because it is evolving and it is the place, to their point, the theater, I think there's 9,000 screens in China now. And you can actually open a movie on 9,000 screens, which is insane.
Yeah.
Which is twice as much as, say, The Avengers, which was on, I think, 4,800 here. So you just see the numbers coming in over there on this product, that it's pretty remarkable.
That's great. Bonnie, I'd love to start with you, but I'd love to have each one of you guys share with us, besides the production side of filmmaking, what other aspects do you get involved in? Do you get involved in the marketing of your films? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think, and this, I learned this when I worked at Disney, but we think for, especially for animated films and films that families share and kids want some of the, piece of the movie, it was always important that from the marketing that you felt like you got, you were seeing or got a piece of what the movie was, whether that's the one sheet or the toy at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever that piece is. And a lot of my responsibility, both when I worked at Disney and when I worked at Dreamworks, was to sort of just, sit in those meetings and, just make sure it felt like it was representative of what the movie really was. I'm not always successful at it, but in terms of getting them to understand the movie and showing them enough of the movie, because our movies get finished so late, or not late, but late in terms of, getting ready to be distributed. We're part of it, and want to make sure that they, how do you show enough but not, give everything away,
Right.
and those kind of things. So starting about 18 months ahead of the release, every week we're sort of in, I'm a part of these meetings, and, whether it's bringing in artists to help get the, artwork ready or that type of thing, I'm involved, I don't have probably the final say, but I'm, definitely involved in the conversation about what they're doing in terms of the campaign and that type of thing.
That's great. What about you?
My hero, I guess, as a producer when I first started producing was David Putnam, who was an English producer. When I was, first like watching a lot of movies, he was just kind of making movie after movie, like Chariots of Fire, or The Mission, or all The Killing Fields. And each of his movies were different stories, but they all had a certain quality to them, and that's what my fantasy or, unfillable ambition was as a producer. And, when I read his book and just learned about him, he was just involved in every single aspect of the film. And most importantly, like, what is the film we're going to make? What's the idea? Then, the screenplay and casting, I think, are the most important elements, more important than production even. And so, in my career, I've always, been involved from the very, very beginning of it to the very, very end of it, and every stage. And when I say involved, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily influential, but I think like Bonnie says, I'm there and I'm a part of it, and I'm able to, by being in all places at all times, you're able to help inform the process and just help it flow.
Great. What about you, Will?
Piggyback on what Barry said, I think that you'll hear from, good producers that they're involved with every aspect. I'm involved with every single aspect. I just don't know any other way. My whole film career was born of myself and, my partner without film degrees or Hollywood connections, or I had never even been to California. We made a little movie, and, we made it on our college campus, and we self-distributed it, and we promoted it, and we made a little money, and then we did it again and again, and then now, we have studio relationships. But the key for me is definitely when I come in, I'm saying, look, I know this film, I know this audience, so I have to prove it. So from concept to fruition, marketing is key, very, very important. So for me, a lot of that is grassroots. It resonates what Barry said, about going out and being entrepreneurial, because that's, like I said, how my career was born. So, with my films, even though I have a studio who's going to distribute the film and buy outdoor and radio and TV, I still, on this last release, I flew to, probably, 12 markets myself with my cast, because I still believe very much in grassroots marketing. The other thing is that my films have to cut through all the noise that these guys' films are gonna make. So in order for me to do that, I have to then go out and make it very personal to my audience. I always believe in going out and touching people. If you see a screening of a film, there's a very different reaction you're gonna have if that film is introduced by one of the stars, or even the producer or the writer or what have you, or somebody at the end of that is thanking you for coming out who's associated with the film. So I still believe in those types of things, and it's been very successful so far.
Great. What about you, Scott?
The same. I think to Will's point, at this stage, you've got to be there every step of the way. You've got to find the material, you got to develop it. I mean, weirdly, even the casting of the writer at that moment is so imperative in the initial idea. If you have a book that you want to adapt, that just kind of starts the whole thing running downhill. And then the director and the actors and the set. And as everyone's talking about, it's become now, with the clutter of media, marketing and distribution is just, it's probably the hardest, most time-consuming, and most important thing in a lot of ways, because you have to understand the tea leaves. You've got to know where things are. Like Will's saying, every movie kind of has to zig when another movie's zagging, and you got to be smart about where you can access your audience, and know that sometimes your movie's not a summer movie, it's a spring movie, it's a fall movie, but how do you market it? How do you get people? How do you know psychographically where the audience is? It takes a lot of stuff you study, where people are. I mean, September and October are very hard months for male-driven product for multiple reasons. One, everyone's back to school. Two, it's the baseball playoffs. Three, football has started again. And that is, for many American men, that is their socialization. So you've got to say, how am I going to get a Penn State, fan out of the house when Penn State's playing Michigan and he loves the Bears, and the baseball playoffs are on. It's the Yankees and the Red Sox this year, whatever it is. And when you're in there, you've got to dig hard and fight. You get good media in those places. And, you know, even in the middle of the summer, you got to know now is a harder time with media because there's no first-run television. There's no new Modern Family. So you got to understand cable. And you've got to do things like Will is saying. You got to get your talent out there more and be on different shows. And when is Letterman dark? And it's a Jenga board, and you got to learn it and be in it because you got to constantly push it and find those opportunities to get your message out there.
Barry, I know all of us have been, you know, we've pitched to studios over and over again, and they've told us no. What extra element or what innovative addition did you add to a project that finally got it over the hump, that finally made a studio say yes?
I don't know if I've ever actually successfully pitched a movie to a studio and gotten them to just say yes to a pitch.
But even with the script, was there, I mean, if you had a great script but they weren't quite sure about it, was there anything that you can recall doing that helped them finally say yes?
The only thing I ever did was, like, I remember when we made Rushmore, it was developed by New Line, and Mike DeLuca loved the script and loved the project, and we developed it with him, and he was great to work with. He's a producer now. And we just had a blast doing it, and we got the script to the place where we loved it, and we budgeted it, and we were going to go make the movie. And at the last minute, he had to show it to Bob Shea, who was running the studio, and Bob Shea didn't like it. So there we were, kind of out on the street with our movie, and while we were developing, all sorts of people were saying, if they don't make it, they're crazy, like at other studios. And, you know, if they don't make it, you know, we'll make it in a second. And then, of course, the minute that you go into turnaround and you give it to them and you're like, okay, well, here we are, they say, oh, you know, it's a really crowded slate right now, and it's a tough, you know. So, you know, all those people kind of turned us down, and we were kind of struggling. And we gave it to, you know, and Disney, the place that eventually made the movie, they turned it down too. It was the head of production, and he turned it down. And so, you know, the one thing that we did in that instance, which got it over the top, was we said, we know that you don't like it. We know that you don't, well, not that you don't like it, you do like it, but you don't believe in it in your job to make the decisions of what the slate's going to be to invest the money. Would you, like, not negatively influence this if we give it to your boss, Joe Roth? And Joe was the chairman of the studio, and he was a fan of Wes's previous movie, and he decided, and Donald was gracious enough to say, no, if he likes it and he wants to do it, you know, I'm happy for you guys. And it was a super cool move on his part, and Joe loved it and made the movie. So I think that was the one thing that we did that put something over the top, was to just get somebody to be nice enough to let us go around them.
Got it. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you this, because you and I have a project that we need to get over the hump right now with Clint Culpepper. So, what have been some of the things you've done to get things over the hump?
Well, you know, I'm going to answer that, but I have a question for Barry.
Yeah.
Barry, so elaborate a little bit though, because you said I've never taken a pitch to a studio and had them say yes, if I heard you correctly.
That's right.
So elaborate, what does that mean? How have you been successful? What is the process?
My career is, I think, different than your career or Scott's career. We all go about it a different way. My whole thing was, in the beginning, you know, I positioned myself as this kind of artistic person, which is kind of funny if you know me, but I got away with it. And so the idea was to help writer. The other thing was I identified like there was a study in Variety in the like 90s or something like that when they said, what gets movies made? And they just looked at development, and they said, okay, do pitches get made? Do spec scripts get made? Do packages get made? Do book adaptations get made? You know, and what about at Warner Brothers, what's the development to production ratio? And at Disney and Paramount. And they did this detailed study, which I feel like should be done every 3 to 5 years. It seems like such a useful tool for the industry to kind of understand ourselves. And one of the things that just leapt off the page at me was that writer-director movies got made much more often than any other kind of movie in the system throughout every studio across the board. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, I like Woody Allen, and I like the Coen brothers, and I like, you know, there's certain kind of movies that I like too, that were writer-director movies. So in the beginning of my career, you know, Wes and Owen asked me to do Rushmore. Night Shyamalan asked me to do The Sixth Sense. So I was in the fortunate position of having people ask me to go on their rides. And then the other projects that were like the dreams that I wanted to do, which one of them Scott helped me with, was Munich. You know, there was a story that I wanted to tell. I found the book that was the way to tell it. I brought it to Universal. They bought it for me. They hired a very expensive writer for me. And then, you know, off we went. So I never kind of came into a studio just like, here's my dream, help me. Because one of the things that's makes me not that good a producer is I really hate being rejected. And I kind of have this sense of like this power dynamic between myself and the studio where I hate that they have all the power because they have all the cash, and I have no power because I have no cash. So I hate going into that position where I've just got me and my kind of big-eyed dream, and they can just kind of crap all over it. And so I've always wanted to have the gun loaded enough that if they said no, they'd be nervous.
So now you.
So how are you going to get your movie
When
made,
you say
Will?
the gun loaded. And then, so, you know what? I had a project, the first project that really, like, my first big theatrical release. I went and pitched it all over town. And it was a movie, and it was about kids at a black college, historically black college, and I had gone to historically black college, I knew the world, and they were steppers, and they stepped, and you know, it was about this kid from, you know, an impoverished background. He went to college, and I didn't have any cast, but there was this new singer named Chris Brown, and I was selling it, and I went to every studio around town, every studio. Every last one said no. They said, absolutely not, I'll never make that movie. I don't know what stepping is. Who the hell is Chris Brown? We didn't know they were black colleges. Is that even legal? Like, literally, these were the conversations I was having. So I came back, and here's why you have to kind of know, you know, where you're pitching in the studio and the appetite, et cetera. So I had not pitched it yet to Clint Culpepper, who runs Screen Gems, who is absolutely one of my best relationships, one of my best friends in the business, and my success, you know, no small part of it is attributed to the relationship I have with him, because relationships are very important. And so he hadn't heard it yet, but one of his execs, the one that said no, we came back, we revised the pitch, pitched it everywhere, came back to Sony last. Everybody told us no twice. Came back into Screen Gems, and the exec said, you know what, he's never gonna make this movie. But they had just done a movie called You Got Served, and it was a small dance movie that made for like $8 million. It'd done like $40 million domestically. They said, you know what, Clint has been in meetings talking about how can we have a You Got Served 2. We need to make You Got Served 2. So I said, I got it. Bring me in. I got You Got Served 2. So I went in and pitched Clint Culpepper, and I said, listen, You Got Served 2. One of You Got Served kids leaves LA and goes to this college on the other side of the country, and he learns this new style of dance. Don't worry about what's gonna be in it. It's a dance movie. It doesn't care. They don't care. It doesn't matter. And it's gonna be really cool. And he said, absolutely, I love it. Let's do it. And that movie became Stomp the Yard. And it was #1 for 2 weeks. It made like $70 million. And that's, you know, ultimately how we got that made. And what's funny is that I promise you, I got a call from every studio that I had gone to, every last studio, and they all said the same thing. Why the hell didn't you bring that to us? Every last one of them. They said, we would have made that so much better. We would have marketed more. Why? Next time, bring us something like that. So we got to figure it out. That's our challenge. We got to see what the appetite is, and we will.
Good stuff. Scott, I don't know if you've got any stories to add.
You know, it's funny. You think about it, the first movie I produced, actually, you know, I was running Universal Pictures, and my partner at the time, Mary Parent, and I had done it for about 10 years, and we were like, we want to be producers. We'd always kind of wanted to be, and I started in the business with Lauren Donner and Dick Donner, and loved it, and frankly never saw myself as a studio executive, and got recruited over there and loved it and had a great time, but it was time to kind of go back and make movies. And I had known Vince Vaughn since we were about 25 years old, since right at Swingers, actually. The party in Swingers is at my friend's house, and we're all in the background if you go back and look at that. Because they had no money, and they asked to piggyback a party of ours. And we'd talked for years and years about things, and at the time, Wedding Crashers hadn't come out, and we tried to get some things at Universal, and they just weren't connecting. And weirdly, people thought he was a dramatic actor at the time because he'd kind of gone off from comedy. And I was getting ready to leave, and he's like, you know, I've got this idea, and I want to do this film, The Breakup. And I'm like, okay, good, this should be great. It's Vince Vaughn, this will be funny. And all of a sudden, people are like, oh God, I'm not really sure. And of course, kind of to Will's story, it was like, well, you know, and they don't get together at the end. That seems kind of a bummer. And what are you guys going to do with it? And then Wedding Crashers happened. Everyone's like, we love this movie. It's so great. And you know, that's just what happens in the business. And it was a weird, fun, great experience because we got to kind of do it on our own and have this great time with each other. And Peyton Reed I'd made Bring It On with, and Jen Aniston, we'd done a lot together, and she was who we wanted badly. And it was that fun moment where you take an actress to dinner and you're both kind of, you know, spinning your wheels and telling her why she should be in this movie, and you're going, please God, have her say yes. And she did, you know, because a lot of times, you know, you don't always, I know it's a dirty secret, but you don't always get your first choice. And to have her and them, and it was a challenge, kind of to what Barry said earlier. We tested the movie, and the whole premise, whether you like it or not, but the premise of the movie was to say, every committed relationship you're in, there was one that preceded it that you were really bad at that made you good at the new one. That was the whole reason we wanted to make the movie. It's why we called it The Breakup. It's why we kind of left it ambiguous at the end. And the first test screening we had, the ending, and people didn't like it, and I grew up in the Valley and wasn't in the movie business, and I was about 37 at the time, and the lights come up and I'm walking, and you know, no one ever knows who a producer is unless your movie doesn't work, then they know who you are. But if it doesn't, you're just the jackass in the background. But this girl walks up to me and she goes, "Are you Scott Stuber?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I'm Denise, you know, I went to high school with you." And I was like, "Oh, it's great to see you," you know, and she's like, "That ending sucks. Like, fix that ending right now. Like, they have to get together," and starts like pointing at me. I'm like, okay, here we are. This is interesting. We got into a whole debate about it. We changed some stuff, but it was to everyone's point, like you gotta believe, because if you don't believe, everyone's going to tell you it's not going to work in some shape or form, and sometimes it doesn't. But the great thing about it is, like I said earlier, you get scars, you keep pushing, and if you believe in things, some of the best stories about movies getting made usually, frankly, take 5, 6, 7 years, and movie time, that's not that long. In human time, it is, but in movie time, it's not.
Bonnie, talk to us a little bit about the Dreamworks system. Like, how do you see their system any different from the other studios in terms of getting a film greenlit over there?
Well, most of the development there is done, you know, internally. We have a development team, and they look for projects and look for things that, again, Jeffrey Katzenberg and the creative team are interested in. And I feel like, well, in my career, I have a background in live action, but I feel like some films, I found them, and some films find me. And I feel like in my animation career, they sort of found me. And again, some of the development is done in terms of, there's sometimes a first draft of a screenplay or an idea, and the development team pitches the producers and the directors there and see, who might be interested in it. And a lot of it is instead of, again, taking an idea, which they are open to that on occasion, but at least the projects I've done there, I've just been fortunate enough, I've done a couple for Dreamworks, and it's take a project like that and then help, kind of see it to the next step, a step that would ensure that it would be produced as the kind of film that we felt like we could make and market and be, under the Dreamworks, I guess, brand, so to speak. And that's what a lot about How to Train Your Dragon was like that. It was based on a book series. And it was something that, I told the studio that I really liked and I believed in it and I thought we could do it. And so they ended up buying the book. And we did a lot of work on what we call the development of it, just in terms, not just the screenplay, but really doing a lot of visual work, thinking that how, this is what this film would be like and how could it reach our audience. And even though Jeffrey, sort of liked the book, he felt like a story about a coming of age for a little boy was sort of kind of Disney's purvey. But we convinced him that there was this story of the boy and the dragon and how that could really, cross over into something that we feel like more like something that Dreamworks would do. So it's really, again, just like, these guys do, it's really about selling, selling the idea, even if it's something that forget where it started. It's just showing that it can be, this great film, and these are the people that would come and work on it and how it would all kind of come together. And I think that's, idea for casting or idea for all those types of ideas. I believe that's very similar to to the sort of the live action model.
Okay, cool. I think it's time for Q&A now, so let's see how we're going to do this. There we go.
My name is Andrea Dimiti. And I just had the question then, have you ever came across a situation where you had to pick up a sterile script? And if so, how did you approach the writer?
What kind of
Have
script?
a sterile script.
Sterile script?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Bad
It's
script.
a,
Oh, a
Like a
bad
script
script?
that's sitting there
Script.
and no one's advocating, or
it's
bad
a script that has been written based on material that you're trying to secure, but you have to pick it up because it has similarities to the material you're developing.
Oh, I
but it's not
understand what you're saying.
necessarily
That's,
that
that's kind of like just a legal issue. If you're dealing with a studio, for example, like there's a book that I had the rights to when I was at Universal in my discretionary fund, John O'Hara's Appointment in Samara, and somebody had written a script on it that I wasn't fond of their script, and I wanted to start over with Robert Benton, who was going to write the script for me, and so the studio just made a deal with that writer and said, we're going to option your material, and if we make the movie, we're going to pay you even more money. And so you want to have those rights, because one of the other dirty secrets in Hollywood is that it's very easy to prove, to win a suit of copyright infringement in Hollywood. All you have to prove is that, one, that someone had reasonably could have had access to your material, and two, that there's a preponderance of similarity, which is a very vague term, preponderance of similarity. And if a judge thinks there's a preponderance of similarity and that you had enough possibility of access to the idea, they can win the lawsuit. So it's very important to secure rights to anything that could later come back at you if you happen to make a big hit movie. So what happens is whoever's the financier of the movie, in order to feel comfortable investing all that money making it, they'll want to buy what you're calling a sterile screenplay and just own it as part of the process. Is that not your question?
Hi.
Next question?
But it was a good answer.
That was a good answer.
Hi.
Who's got the
My,
next question?
my question is about the casting process of packaging, and it's the chicken and egg question, which is, how do you get around, creative ways to get around, you can't get your cast till you have the money, you can't get the money till you have your cast?
I think it's an easy answer. You have to have an unbelievably great script.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an indie producer, it's the material that sets you apart, And like I was saying, having a direct relationship, an agent may never allow whatever talent piece gets your movie going to attach themselves without some assurances. But if you can find a way to get to that talent, or maybe sometimes managers, are more open, and you've got really, really good material that appeals to that actor on some level, I would say that's the way.
On the Last Station, we had Meryl Streep and Anthony Hopkins playing Sophia and Sophia Tolstoy and Leo Tolstoy, and the money came through, and neither of them could do the movie. So we ended up with Meryl Streep. We ended up with Helen Mirren, at the 11th hour, and it worked out fine. It was a good script, and she wanted to do it, and it didn't matter that somebody else was going to do it, and we had to go with when we had the money.
If you watch any one of the 24 award shows that will be coming to you during the upcoming season, you'll just see in the actors' eyes, when they come across a role that they want, they grab it and they hold it, and that's what they live for, is those roles. So as producers, it's not, everyone's too focused on getting the money and the stars, and all you have to do is get a really, really good script of a good idea together, and those people will start chasing after you.
Good afternoon. My name is Clinton Lewis, and my question is, if a person has a wealth of work experience in a different industry, but they have a bunch of transferable skills, how would they go about getting an opportunity to learn the craft that you guys do without necessarily being a PA or something of that nature? Is there another role in the production process that someone with no previous work experience could enter into to learn what you guys do?
To be a creative producer?
Yes.
The thing is, I'm sure, I was an assistant. We all kind of start. I think you've got to be willing. That the one thing about it is everybody wants to be in this business. So you can never have an ego about it. You have to have a work ethic, and you got to, kill, and you learn that as an assistant, and so I think you've got to be willing to have an entry-level thing, and if you've got good skills, you're going to rise up very quickly, but you've got to go to people and say, I'm willing to do what it is, because then it's just about knowledge and how to do things and learning how to develop and learning how to work with writers and learning how to get your scripts right. But it's a lot of coming into this business is humility and saying, I'm willing to do what it takes, as opposed to just make me an associate producer because I think I should be, which frankly I get a lot of. People just kind of think it, but it really is, how can I prove myself to be valuable? And we go through it as a group every day in terms of what we have to do, but it's really saying, I'm someone who can work on story, I'm someone who has a history of film knowledge, I'm someone who can come in here and help advocate things that are important and help whatever production company or whatever studio get access to those people and those stories.
This is also just my particular path. I don't know if it's relevant to you, but when I was a literary agent. I didn't start off in the producing world, so I was just like helping writers and stuff like that. But I wanted to be a producer, and so I thought to myself, I thought about the Olympics and just like how someone who's a gymnast like has to train years and years and years, and then in 2 minutes they're either a hero or a flop. And I felt like, well, when I do my first movie, what do I have to bring to the table? Because I have absolutely no experience to bring to the table. So what am I going to bring? And one of the things I decided was, I asked myself, how am I going to train for my Olympic moment? Which is what I thought of my first movie experience as, whether I was going to be an associate producer or whatever it was, just my chance to be a part of the process. And I decided the one thing I had control over is my education, my knowledge. And so I spent like 5 years like watching a lot of movies and reading a lot of books and reading books about the movies I watched, and watching movies that were out of the books I was reading. And I was determined to be the most knowledgeable film person in the room, so to make up for my lack of experience, because I wanted to make sure I was bringing something to the table that wasn't abstract, that was kind of directly related to the process, and that I could speak the language that writers and directors and actors and cinematographers and the people who really have their hands on it speak.
My question is that, so what is the state right now of African-American films? Are studios content with just domestic box office, or is there a strategy to expand into international markets? And how do we do that? Would it seem like pandering if you cast a Japanese character and think like a man or something like that? Or what's the route to get into the international markets?
Who's that question for? I'm joking. Just messing with you. So the question is, are the studios satisfied with just domestic
African-American films?
Well, they're more satisfied than they should be, if you ask me, because there's not enough of a push to expand it. But here's the thing, they make them for numbers such that it makes sense on the balance sheet if they're domestic successes. So, the budgets are a lot lower than four-quadrant movies that have to do global business, But, I mean, look, let me just say this. I'm not, an angry producer by any means. I'm real happy, you know what I mean? I sleep really good at night because if my films, make $30 or $40 million, people are smiling. And I haven't had a film make 30 or 40. My films have made like twice that. So I'm really, really fortunate. And it's a balance. If you make a film, I think, Bonnie was saying 80, you got to make a lot. If you make, if that's your negative cost going in. So, there's a give and a take there. So definitely it's a growth area. But if you can make films, and it doesn't have to be African, I don't care what, just genre films. Make them, for a number. If you're playing in that $20 million range, your opportunity for success is greater because you don't have to do as much business as some of the other films that are out there that spend a whole lot more at a time when the industry is self-adjusting a little bit.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shaked Berenson. A couple of you touched on it, but I was wondering if you can tell, how did you put your foot on the door in the studio system, and what kind of advice you give to young producers and young companies and want to do the same. Thank you.
Did you guys?
You know, I didn't, I mean, it's weird. It's changing and evolving. I didn't know anyone. I came back and I was a PA on a lot of commercials and had crazy experiences. And then a friend of mine's sister said that the studios have human resources departments, which they still do. And I put on my one suit and my kind of mediocre resume and went and took typing tests and just said, I will do anything in the feature film divisions. And I didn't get an answer for a long time. And then oddly, in the symmetry of my kind of life, Universal called and said they had an opening as a publicity marketing assistant. And you know, I think the thing about this conference, what it represents, what happened for me was you have press screenings on every movie. So the filmmaker would call me. I took the RSVPs. So Susan Jones from E! And Tom from Associated Press. The filmmakers would call me in their insecurity and anxiety, like I now understand, and say, who's coming, from what outlet? And I got to know Ivan Reitman, because he had a deal at Universal at the time, and he was about to leave and go make a movie called Dave at Warner Brothers. And I talked to him and talked to his group, and they liked me, and they said, you know, one day one of them said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to produce movies. And they said, well, I'm making this movie with Dick and Lauren Donner, and she needs a creative assistant. So you should go meet her. And so luckily I went over and interviewed with them quite a few times and got the job. And it is what this conference is about, which is you got to know people. You got to introduce yourselves to people. You got to know people. And you got to be gracious to people, you know, because I was 21 years old at that time, and this has nothing to do with ego at all, but 9 years later I was the head of Universal. And so I understood who treated me really well at that time. I cared about those people. I was loyal to those people. And a lot of those people who treated me well had no idea that I was going to be that guy. I could easily just, you know, floated off into nowhere. So get to know your colleagues, care about them, trust them, and try to interconnect with as many people this weekend as you can, because you all should help each other and you'll all find paths to each other. There's a very good chance down the line I'll produce a movie with one of these people, you know, because of just this experience alone and respecting them and who they are and the quality of what they bring. So you always have to be open to that. But push and pull and go to the studio and say, I'll do whatever you want. Here I am, you know, let me in.
I think we just have time for a couple more questions.
So this is for everybody on the panel, but Scott, you said earlier that we're all really just 15-year-olds that are trying to figure out our way in life. So if we're all 15, then what do you want to be when you grow up?
We'll answer that question.
You know, I love what I'm doing. I want to continue to do this, continue to make films that, you know, hopefully touch and affect people. Barry said something earlier, define your own success. That's something that's really, really important. When you go in to make a film, what do you want out of that film? Define it for yourself, not let the industry or the studio or the actor, nobody else. Is it that you want a big box office success? You want critical acclaim? You want to make a friend? Whatever it is, like define your own success. Really though, I mean,
I want to make a friend.
And go for it. So I think that's what I want to do. I want to continue to define my own success and hit my own levels of success.
Hey, my name's Rob. First of all, thanks guys for doing this, because I'm sure everybody can say it means so much to us for you guys to share. This question, though, is specifically for Barry. A, I'll be your friend. And B, you brought up something that I was actually really curious about. If you're producing one of my movies, and I come to you and I say, I don't want you to tell the studio that we're going to go spend all this extra money, and this is why you're working with me, because you wanted to do a good film, what would you do?
I would say no.
There you go. Honest.
What, okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi,
Wait,
Tracey.
I'm sorry, you know what? I think she's got. Good, how are you doing?
A legal question. You was talking about preponderance of similarity. The first thing popped up in my head was, okay, why that didn't work for Disturbia versus Rear Window?
I don't know. I mean, people
Wait,
don't.
has anybody seen Rear Window?
Yeah. People
Has
don't.
anybody seen Disturbia?
Yeah. People don't. Yeah. People don't
Yes.
sue. People don't sue because if you're that person, a lot of times, if you are going to sue somebody, say, "Oh, you stole my idea," you're kicking up a lot of dust. And then when it comes time for you to pitch your next idea, people are going to say, I don't want to hear your idea, because if there's anything I ever do that's remotely similar, I'm going to get a call from his lawyer. So there's all sorts of other fish in the sea. So that's a reason a lot of people don't sue, is because it's a big gambit, but it's a career ender in a way.
Okay, I think that was it, you guys. I want to thank our awesome panelists, Bonnie, Barry, Will, Scott, for sharing their experiences and information with all of us. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good rest of the day.